Today on Panelism, we're talking about a really beautiful book that rewrites the rules of magic.
Welcome to Panelism, what is this? This is a podcast. Welcome to Panelism, the podcast where we talk about the comics and graphic novels worth having on your shelf. I'm Taylor Trask.
I'm Todd A.
Yeah. Some days you just don't know.
I wonder if the casual listener now, granted, we probably mention on every episode, or at least I do, wonder if the casual listener can ever pick out which episode we have recorded first in the day.
That's something for the super fans to decide.
It just gets looser and looser.
I think that's a good thing, Todd.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm always concerned about how sharp I am on our shows, because on one hand we have this great resource where we're recording on computers and we can look anything up, but that also tends to turn you into a bit of a lore hound and a nerd, and where you're like, I've got to have every fact at my fingertips and look this up. And that's just exhausting, man.
Or it just massively distracts me and we get on 10 tangents that we don't need to, which, by the way, we do, dear listener, before we record, there's usually about 20 minutes where I just free rant about any number of things Kanye West style. And then it's like, oh shit, we should probably record. And then
Kanye West style.
Have you seen his interview on Letterman? Man, talk about free association. That guy is the king. I actually really like that interview, to be honest.
Now, fun fact about Kanye West, Taylor and I used to work for him.
More or less.
I built his first blog ever.
Wow.
In conjunction with some of our colleagues, of course. They probably told me exactly what to write. Code, because I did not write it. And I remember that it was pre-Twitter, and Twitter was around, I guess, but it was like hadn't taken off, and boy, he had a lot of all caps, a lot of caps lock blog posts.
Yep.
That was amusing.
Those were the days. If you want to see what Kanye West's website used to look like, type in Kanye University into Google, and you'll see a screenshot or two. No, you'll see a screenshot or two. It was like a Adult Swim cartoon sort of cityscape. And
it was insane. I can't believe we built that. That was the thing where I had nothing to do with building that, because this was in 2007 and it was built totally in Flash.
That's right. It was. Yep. Echo hadn't really done a lot of Flash sites at that point. So this was
our colleague Brian wrote that all in ActionScript.
Jesus.
It was freaking nuts.
That was back when websites were websites and men were men. And Kanye was Kanye.
We had to code our sites uphill in the snow. Oh my God. See what I mean about getting looser?
I do feel that way, though. I do feel like that is the somebody has sort of passed into a new threshold of age, when it's like, that's when websites were websites. Like I've had that rant a few times now where I'm like, you guys don't understand. You kids don't understand. We used to have to go to a website for everything. Tour dates. Videos. There was no YouTube. You just went to a website for a video.
So when someone like Kanye West, or I don't know, Michael Penn comes in, it's a site that is utterly unnavigable.
Yeah.
It's really weird as a web developer to go, you want to hide the tour dates where? Nobody can find them anywhere else.
I don't remember Michael Penn's website. What was that about?
Oh my God. He was the one that had the puzzle where it was like this weird looking electronic box. It was also all Flash. And to get to different sections, you couldn't just press one button. You would have to like flip this lever up and slide this thing over. And so it was like a great game, but it was all built in that feeling that everyone, and people still do this, which is ridiculous. People think every website is like, oh, people are going to spend so much time on this if it's entertaining. It's like, no, they just want to know when you're on tour, And so his was this. Apparently the feedback we kept getting was, no, that's too easy to find stuff.
Jesus. It's like he was auditioning to be a CD-ROM developer, and he wanted to like use this as his kind of his sandbox.
And it may have been to promote a specific album that had sort of a mystery box, theme to it. I don't know. I know it was.
Then become a magician.
Yeah. You're a musician, not a magician.
I mean, if that was the navigation to get into Penn and Teller's fan club, that would be cool, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that makes sense. Not, True. Hey, I want to see you this weekend. Where are you? Oh, you've got to solve this puzzle, and then summon the Enchantress of the Deep, and she'll provide a riddle that will lead you to a pot of gold, which doesn't include gold, but includes another clue. And you're like, ah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Getting looser and looser. We have talked about before that I've been on stage with Penn and Teller, right? They made a woman appear right next to me, and it was insane.
Yes.
If that's not on an episode, that's all you're getting. But
it is. No, it is. I forget which one. So. I'm still very jealous from hearing it. Proud of you, but jealous all the same for me. So,
man, I love those guys. I also at a book signing told Penn I was really happy he told the story about his testicle skin falling off in that book. But that's another story. If you want to read that, I can't remember what book is that in. It's his second. It's not God No, it's the other one. It's the Atheist Holidays one or whatever like that. So yeah, it's a great story about his testicle skin.
Well, that was panelism today, folks. Enjoy your book.
We're back to the kid-friendly broadcasting. I am going to talk about a book called Iscariot. And I'll give you the facts real quick because you have actually previewed a bit of this, so we can jump into it together. The author and artist is known as S.M. Vidaurri, published by Boom, and then also listed as Archaea. So I don't know if Archaea is always a part of Boom or vice versa or whatever. And debuted in 2015. And it is a just standalone graphic novel. It is just a one contained unit that does not continue.
I think Archaea, just real quick, I think Archaea is a subsidiary of Boom, which I did not know. Because I'm looking at the credits now, the in-book credits, published by Archaea, a division of Boom Entertainment.
Wow. I didn't know that. I actually would have pegged it the other way around, but that makes
seriously.
Boom does make sense to be the bigger one. I wonder why it was double branded or if I just got that off of Amazon. Anyway.
No. Archaea is the primary publishing arm, though.
I did take the back of the book summary from Amazon to read to you, but it actually made such a big deal out of his past work. Like it wasn't just cited in parentheses, and I'm going to skip a whole bunch of it because I'm going to try to get to like what the book's actually about through the summary. But it cites some of Vidaurri's other work on other books. And it says you might understand, after citing those, says you might understand when we say his watercolor stylings are hauntingly beautiful to look at. They have a soft gentleness to them, yet can convey the most stark of imagery. His new, I'm assuming this stands for original graphic novel, OGN, has us completely mesmerized, once again, invoking comparisons to the Legend of Korra and the works of Hayao Miyazaki.
I will completely agree with that assessment.
Cool.
That's when I saw the art, I was like, oh, that's exactly what this is.
Oh, perfect. And so here's the story. What it is. When Carson, a young girl living with cancer, is bestowed with age-old magic by a rebellious sorcerer named Iscariot, she must navigate her new powers, face the life she had thought she left behind forever, and take on the order of magicians who want to control her destiny. Carson discovers that Iscariot's intentions might not have been as altruistic as it first appeared, and learns the hard way that magic comes at a cost. So I didn't read that actually before I read the book. This was a really rare one that came up for me in a Comixology Unlimited. I know we talk about Comixology Unlimited all the time, but it was like, on those books you may like. And I kind of just tapped into it, saw the watercolor art and borrowed it, And when we were planning out a show, I a few days earlier just sat down and read it and went, oh, wow. Okay. That's what I'm doing. It was, I told you, so then because of technical delays, like you've had a chance to look into this, and I kind of think we ought to just start with your first impressions on it, because you had something that's really easy for me to build off of and kind of further the discussion. So what did you think?
Well, I'm glad we're doing this because others may have this impression You see the cover, you're like, oh, interesting. And it's definitely got that Archaea indie, sort of storybook kind of quality that a lot of, I mean, good Lord, Tale of Sand is Archaea. Many other books too.
Oh, so it's got, whoa, interesting, because did you know that Vidaurri worked on Jim Henson's The Storyteller Witches book?
Yeah, I'd seen that in that giant list of credits. Yeah, I'd seen that.
Gotcha.
After I kind of picked it up, I was like, oh, who's this guy? So it does this thing that every once in a while I see happen in a graphic novel, and it always kind of pains me. It does this thing where the first sort of introduction chapter, I guess it's a chapter, presents a different story that I wish this whole book was. And I say that because after this sort of introduction, it's kind of a flashback that it opens on. It jumps into the future, and then the rest of the book is all a different timeline. And there's a reason for that, but it's sort of the way the art is set up, the color choices, it really lent itself for the story that was being told when the book opened. I was like, oh, I love this. And then I think when it changed, I was a little disappointed, and I just never got into the primary story. It dragged on a little too long for me.
Did you bail out like almost immediately once it went to the primary story, or did you go another whole chapter into it? How far do you think you got?
I got as far as what was the scene where Iscariot is talking to the Wizard Council and the old man is sick.
Okay, gotcha.
So I got to about there because I'm like, I just wanted to see, like, well, when do they come back and do it?
Right.
And then so I was like, oh God, it just didn't kind of have there was an aesthetic to the beginning. And because the color does change, right? Like the color changes very differently when it kicks into the modern day. So there's an aesthetic in terms of the color, the way the art fits the story being told that I really liked. And then when it changed, not that what it presented was bad, I had just gotten so used to and addicted to that opening that I was like, oh, okay, well, all right. And so, it happens once in a while.
Well, I think that's, I had a similar experience. There were definitely parts where I was sort of pushing my way through to get to the next page. And then there's a part where all that kind of flipped around on me. So that's why I thought it would be good to talk about that.
Yeah, please.
I do think one thing that's interesting to note about the story and the bit that you pointed out is from the prologue, I mean, you can guess that it is like the long past, the distant past, but it doesn't say anything like that. So as far as we know, this prologue is happening right before the story. And then we get one of those, I think, kind of annoying panels where it says 400 years later, and you go 400 years. Oh my God, that is way too far away, But the prologue, we see this obelisk, looks like the Washington Monument, standing on this seaside cliff and a town burning, and it's all in very like rust colored watercolors, and it's just, I mean, the art style is gorgeous, really.
Well, the architect, it kind of, I mean, it kind of felt like it might have been ancient Rome. You didn't know.
Exactly.
It had a sort of a timeless but vaguely European quality to it.
There are a couple of those like statues where it's, partially collapsed, or the head is sort of caved in, and they definitely look like Roman emperor, imperial kind of art.
Yeah.
And this wizard named Ziosh is talking to this little boy named Iscariot. And he explains that all their magic is wrapped into the obelisk, and he has to transfer this magic to Iscariot, and so they perform a ritual at this obelisk. But as this is happening, the town is burning, and eventually, like a soldier runs up and says, they've taken over the town. We have to get out of here. This ship has just then pulled up cliffside, and you see soldiers like load the obelisk on the ship and sail away, to a better life. So that's what's happened. And Iscariot, so the rituals happened. There's much later in the book that that we find out something happened within that whole scene that's not talked about, and you don't see it. And I think that was one of those failings where it kind of flipped on me. Like it started, it jumps really far ahead, and then there's a part near the end where you find out like details have been withheld from you, and that's always kind of a frustrating thing. Like if you're gonna have sort of mysterious clues, you should probably plant them, early on so that they pay off. But yeah, we jump 400 years later and we meet this young girl named Carson, and she is in the hospital with cancer, and she has one friend who's about her age named Adyan, and she often meets with this older woman named Mimi who tells her stories about her childhood. And, but you just get the idea that they're all living in a cancer ward receiving, treatment or something like that. And you're right. Like the colors change. It is interesting because it definitely becomes a modern story. And so the lines and angles and things change, but because it's still in the watercolor and, it's just sort of, I'm trying to avoid using the word limited, but it's, there's definitely like a watercolor look to it. It's not like all of a sudden it becomes digital art.
Yeah, exactly.
So it is a weird mixture of like the time stuff. When we first see Iscariot move into this world, he looks very much like Ziyech did in the prologue, where he is now bald, has this skinny goatee. He's wearing this big flowing like blue purple cape, and there's sort of a neck thing that they wear. I can't remember what they call that, but like a bracer on their neck, and he's floating into the hospital, and definitely looks like out of place, so I can see that aesthetic that you missed right away, you're like, and then you're confronted with this, like, oh, this is kind of weird now. I don't know what's going on.
Well, here's the thing. I was looking back through it afterwards, and it's because the intro is so good that, and so of its own sort of design, there's no fault to the author. If this book had just begun with that shot of the cancer ward, of the exterior of the hospital, where it says 400 years later, if it just started there, I probably would have gotten into it just fine.
Wow.
Yeah, because it's like, oh, I like this, and there's a cadence and sort of a thing to it. It's just that beginning was so damn good, and it's some works do that where the opening is like, oh shit, this is its own. This could be its own thing.
And also, you kind of expect that to pay off, because it's like the danger is like it's such a great prologue where you don't know what's going on, why the city is being attacked, why they have to do this ritual right now before they tear the obelisk down and run away. So you kind of want it to pay off right away. Like, what were they running from? And instead it's like so far in the future. Yeah. And now it's modern times. And you're like, well, I don't know what I care about anymore. The kid has already grown up. It's an adult who's somehow survived 400 years. So you get that and you're like, well, that's weird. What I found really compelling about this book was, and it does take a long time to get to this point. I actually liked it's funny that you bailed out right when Iscariot goes back to the Council of Wizards, because I think that's when the art sort of returns to that Roman medieval style. And to me, I wanted to keep exploring like how that works on the modern world. It turns out they live on this island that's sort of completely isolated and floating, a flying island. So it couldn't be less connected. It's like literally not connected to the world, so that's kind of a bummer. I mean, I think it's intriguing for sure, a floating island, but if it had been more of a Themyscira kind of thing, it might have, been more interesting. If they're or like we saw in Endgame where oh my God, where does Thor live? Where they're rebuilding Asgard, like in the Mediterranean, basically. Yeah. If it had been something like that, like there's this weird town full of these, old wizards, that would be really kind of interesting. Not that it isn't interesting. What I found really compelling about this book and really beautiful was that we find out very far into it that sorry, let me back up. Iscariot is visiting this little girl in the hospital who has cancer, and he also visits the old woman that she's friends with. And then he will go away to talk to his, like you said, the Council of Wizards, which is called the Empire, but it's spelled with a Y. Very much like a Gandalf, like, oh, let me set you in the middle of a problem and then I'll leave, kind of thing. So, but what we find out much later is what he's trying to do is change the way that magic is passed along in the society. And at that moment where all that gets explained, and I think I can say this without spoilers, because I think it's, you can still read the book and that doesn't have to be a surprise that's coming. That will maybe help you get through the first part of it. Is there at that moment where he explains how he's trying to change the way magic is passed on, there is a very brief, but I think like very effective way of explaining the mythology of magic and how much of it had to do with sacrifice, whether it was like sacrificing a living thing or making a sacrifice in order to gain magic. And it, as soon as he said that, it like snapped together all the, all these myths and stories and everything. I mean, there's like sort of religious traditions of sacrificing animals in order to please your god. There's the Norse mythology of Odin sacrificing his eye to achieve wisdom, and there's all this, like, it's a life that's sacrificed, or like a literal life, or it is a part of your life or a feature or something that's sacrificed in order for you to advance in quote unquote magic. And what Iscariot has been trying to do is change that by going to a place where everyone is like, it is already sort of predestined that everyone in this hospital, in this particular ward, is probably going to die. So why not go there and plant the magic in someone, give them the chance to live a life, and you don't have to take a life. You just can absorb the energy that's already leaving a life, And at that point, it becomes really, really compelling. My main overall problem with this is that it just takes so long to get to that point where you're sucked in, and then it resolves so quickly after that. And so I really love that you bring up the idea of what if it had just started on that panel that said 400 years later, and then when Iscariot is talking to the Council of Elders, they could do flashbacks back to that prologue and show like how they got here, how they built the Flying City, all that. Yeah. And I think what this would have benefited from throughout, and this, I mean, it's a wonderful book, like artist, creator owned, kind of creator curated property. Great. But a different writer working with this artist might have been able to suggest some structural changes to really make the story more effective with the art. And so, yeah, I as soon as you said you weren't, because off air, you told me that, you got through the prologue and it just didn't really hook you. And I was like, oh, wow, that's probably going to fit with what I think about the end of the book and how it ends too quickly, and I don't really know a fix for that. And I'm curious if it's a formatting problem, because if you are a comic book creator, are you always thinking of things in issues that are, 24 to 32 pages long, and so that's how long every chapter has to be? Or is it a concentration on the art? Is it like a timing issue? I mean, it could be anything. It could literally be like just a budget of time that the artist doesn't have enough time to go back and draw this story out better. But I think there are probably better ways to put it together, because by the time you get to that hook, you're like, I don't know. For me, the ending of the book went by so much faster, because once I was hooked into that new idea of magic, I was in, and there are these really beautiful parts throughout. Like there's just motifs in the art. There's a bird motif. And we see Carson has drawn pictures of particular birds, and her mom smokes a cigarette brand that is like cardinal lights or something like that. And Iscariot does a magic trick where he turns a candy wrapper into a cardinal that Carson can keep in her room. And it keeps turning back into a candy wrapper, except when he is coming to visit. So she has this notification that he is about to arrive, because all of a sudden a cardinal will sort of poke its head out of her backpack. And but even beyond that, they're just like little panels of birds or candles, and they all don't necessarily, I mean, maybe to the artist, they represent something specific, but it builds on that theme. It, like, you feel like I'm in this big connected story. This artist has really thought through all these little details. And I really enjoyed that. And I really love the way that magic is depicted, not in a superhero, like big blasts of magic kind of thing, but in this pretty sort of like, it's sort of like a flame. It's sort of like a flower. It's golden, and it's sort of like will swoosh around them. That's where
the Asian influence, I think, really comes in.
Oh,
like that's why in that opening sort of summary, it does reference Miyazaki. The guy who co-founded Studio Ghibli, basically that guy.
Yes, yeah.
Like the Walt Disney of Studio Ghibli. He's got a very specific kind of sort of open, subtle way of storytelling that a lot of people love. And this did feel very much in that tradition of just sort of quiet moments.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that it's not boring, but just like very subtle.
Well, it is quiet. Yeah.
Very, wind, like the magic is sort of an amplification of nature. So it's like they can just they float effortlessly, and they kind of just exist in this sort of harmonious state. It's not like Doctor Strange whipping a lightning bolt out at people.
Exactly. Yeah. There is actually one great wizard battle, and even that it manages not to look like whipping a lightning bolt. And just in really subtle ways. Like, I think it's interesting that the bolts that they shoot at each other, or the magic spells, curve, and that sort of makes it, just that little thing makes it interesting. But yeah, I wanted to see so much more about the Empire and how they lived, and like spend more time on that floating island. And there's a sort of strange little like conflict at the end where Carson gets to use her magic powers, and we don't, it's just, I guess it's a tempo thing. Like, it's just not wrapped up in the right tempo. It needed to be stretched out in some parts and sped up in other parts. And so the thing that's like the most frustrating to me actually has nothing to do with the story itself or the artist, is that because of the way it's painted, the guided view really underserves this. Like, it is just not meant for guided view. This is almost one where you want the whole page.
And I almost want, because this is very watercolor heavy, I almost wanted to see the texture of the paper under, amplifying that. Like, I almost want this to be hand painted on like parchment, so that it has that kind of quality. I think this is one of those cases where the digital view is great for accessibility, but this definitely feels like something you want to actually own. I'm gonna intentionally look for it next time I'm in a shop that's a little higher end, and just see if they've got it and what it looks like, and I'll report back. That's
a great idea, because so much of those motifs are like backgrounds to a page where the panel sequence has been broken up from a grid that covers the entire page. It'll just be like a cross. There'll be like here's a series of panels going down and a series going across. And in those blank spaces are drawn those motifs of the cracked statues from the island from 400 years ago, or the birds, or the candles, or something like that. So when you're going through guided view, you can mistake those for individual panels, but they're not. They are the marginalia of the page. And I think in that way, it's meant to look much more like an illuminated manuscript. And that just doesn't work in guided view. So that the thing that frustrates me so much about that is because this is free to borrow on Comixology Unlimited right now. And I definitely think you should do that if you're at all intrigued by any of this description, and just check it out, because it's like, you can tell this is a labor of love from this artist, and has really cool ideas and some really great art that just, it's not assembled like in the best way. And I wish, I don't know what I want. I don't know if I wish Comixology would, like maybe Boom and Archaea should have somehow put in their code, like, no, this is not going to be viewable in guided view. You're going to have to go through the full pages and do, finger pinches to expand it or something.
There are two other books that have a similar sort of thing, and you can't get them on Comixology. You can only get them as Kindle digital books. For that very reason, where you can zoom in, you can pinch and zoom, but there's no sort of guided view or cover view or anything like that. It's for that purpose, because the whole thing has to function as one full thing. So I mean, in some cases I see why they did it, because they can get more exposure. I think they pay royalties out of Comixology, much like Spotify does,
right?
Depending on like your use and stuff. So that's great. But man, there should have been a promo code or something like, hey, get 10% off, like a killer physical copy of this, just to emphasize that reading condition.
Yeah, this is, especially with a lot of the stuff we've been covering lately, this is the rare thing that sticks out. That's like, it's so hard, because I would say don't read it digitally, but if you are an unlimited member on Comixology, it's free to read right now. So that's a great way to check it out. But yeah, I'm going to do like you suggested and look for this in a comic book shop, because like I said, I was totally unaware of this, didn't know the creator, didn't know any of this work. I will keep an eye out for his other works that are mentioned in that Amazon book description.
Yeah, same. And just, Archaea, they're kind of like that. I say this about a lot of publishers, but they are really like that amazing, like, you know how some comics publishers are like the killer indie label from like the 70s or 80s. That,
yeah.
Like, and this would be like, I think Archaea is like that killer jazz label that like the best of the best. Like, in Whiplash, when his character's like, you could be a Blue Note signee. Archaea is like the Blue Note of the comics world, where it's like, ooh, shit, like only the best sort of artists, at that level, where there's a technical finesse, I think, and Drawn and Quarterly, obviously, every publisher has that going on, but Archaea specializes in that.
Yeah, I agree. And it fits so well with the only other Archaea title I know we've covered, which is Mouse Guard.
Yep.
And this...
Well, no, Tale of Sand.
Oh, yeah. Perfect, yeah. And it does fit with that too. So, I guess that's where I come down on it. Check it out if you're an Unlimited member, or pick it up at a shop and check it out. The art is just wonderful, and we will definitely share some of this on our Instagram.
Heck yeah. In the meantime, if you want to find more episodes, check us out at panelism.inc. That's panelism.ink. Also, our Instagram handle. Tell your friends about the show. Search and subscribe wherever you find podcasts. If you have any feedback, let us know in comment sections or reviews, good or bad. We love all feedback. So please, if you're a friend or a listener, let's reach out. Tell us what you want to hear. Tell us what you think. We'll always keep sort of adjusting the show accordingly. In the meantime, I think that's all. That's all I got.
That's it. Yeah, we've wrapped this up in a nice, tidy 31 minutes.
Hell yeah!
You're on point today,
Woo!
Despite being looser. Great. I will talk to you on the next episode.
And I'll see you then.
Or I will see you at another time.
Welcome to Pan.
What's the Henry Zabrowski like metal guitar?
What's really funny is that is a great impression of what is another impression. That doesn't happen often, where it's like, here's my impression of a guitar, now here's my impression.